There is a moment, you have felt it before, when someone walks into a room and something shifts. The air changes. Conversations lose their thread. Eyes move without permission. The person has said nothing yet, done nothing remarkable, and yet everyone is already leaning, however slightly, in their direction. We tend to call this charisma, or charm, or magnetism, as if naming it explains it. It does not. What we are witnessing in that moment is the result of a long, invisible process, an inner architecture built deliberately over time, and it begins not with techniques or tactics but with something far more fundamental, the complete and unsentimental knowledge of oneself. Robert Greene, in The Art of Seduction, opens not with instructions on how to speak or touch or pursue, but with a taxonomy of types. He asks, before anything else, that you look honestly into the mirror, not at your appearance, but at your effect. What do people feel in your presence? What energy do you naturally produce? Are you the siren, whose physical intensity overwhelms rational thought? The charmer, who makes every person feel like the only soul in the room? The dandy, whose refusal to conform creates an irresistible intrigue? The charismatic, who moves through the world as though touched by something larger than ordinary life? Greene's point is not that you must perform one of these archetypes like a costume. His point is that seduction begins with excavation, finding the version of yourself that is already magnetic and removing everything that suppresses it. Most people, he argues, are so armored by social anxiety, self-consciousness, and the exhausting desire to be liked that they have buried their natural power entirely. This is where the work starts, and it is uncomfortable work. To become genuinely seductive, you must first confront the ways in which you are anti-seductive. Greene is unsparing on this point. Neediness is the single greatest killer of seductive energy, not ugliness, not age, not circumstance, but the desperate, detectable hunger for approval that most people carry like a visible wound. When someone senses that you need something from them, validation, attention, love, even just agreement, they instinctively pull back. The dynamic inverts. What should be a current flowing toward them becomes a drain pulling at them, and people move away from drains. The first and most important transformation a student of seduction must undergo is the movement from need to sufficiency, developing, genuinely and not as performance, a relationship with yourself so complete that your engagement with others comes from desire rather than desperation. This is not the cold detachment of the sociopath. It is closer to what the Stoics understood as autarkeia, self-sufficiency, and what modern psychology recognizes as secure attachment. Dale Carnegie, writing decades before Greene, circled the same truth from a different angle. People are fundamentally, overwhelmingly interested in themselves. Their deepest hunger is not for pleasure or wealth or even love in the abstract, it is to feel significant, to feel that their inner life is real and visible to at least one other person. The seducer who understands this possesses a skeleton key. Your attention, when it is full and genuine and free of the static of your own need, becomes one of the rarest and most intoxicating things you can offer another human being. But attention alone is not enough, and here is where most well-meaning people stall. They listen well, they are kind, they are present, and they are overlooked. Warmth without mystery is comfort, and comfort, however pleasant, does not pull at the deeper registers of desire. Ovid knew this. Freud mapped its mechanics. Greene synthesizes it into a principle he returns to again and again throughout his work: people desire most what they cannot fully read. The seductive self is not an open book. It has depths that are suggested but not confirmed, a private world that the other person feels invited to discover but never quite reaches. This is not dishonesty. It is the recognition that total transparency is the enemy of fascination, that when everything is visible, the imagination has nowhere to go, and it is the imagination, more than any physical reality, that does the true work of desire. So the foundation of seduction is this trinity: know yourself deeply enough to project without performing, free yourself from need enough to give without grasping, and preserve enough mystery that the other person's imagination becomes your most powerful ally. These are not steps you complete once and move past. They are a continuous practice, a way of inhabiting yourself that, once learned, begins to reshape every interaction you have. And when that inner architecture is genuinely in place, when you have done the quiet, unglamorous work of becoming someone who is truly present, truly sufficient, and genuinely intriguing, the external world begins to respond in ways that can feel almost uncanny. People seek you out without knowing why. Conversations with you leave others feeling strangely more alive. You begin to notice the room shifting when you enter it. That shift is not magic. It is the natural result of what you have built. And once it begins, the real work, the deliberate, exquisite, almost musical work of seduction in motion, can begin. There is a particular kind of conversation that most people have never had but immediately recognize when they find themselves inside one. The words being exchanged are ordinary enough, questions, observations, maybe a shared laugh, but something beneath the words is moving differently. There is a current. A tension that is not uncomfortable but electric, that makes the other person acutely aware of their own pulse. This is not accident. This is craft. And like all craft, it follows principles that can be learned, internalized, and eventually performed with the effortless precision that makes them invisible. The first principle is this: intrigue is not created by being interesting. It is created by being interested, strategically, selectively, and with a quality of attention so focused that the other person feels briefly X-rayed. Green calls this the art of paying attention with purpose. You are not merely listening. You are reading. You are gathering the unspoken material, the hesitations, the subjects they return to without realizing, the small flashes of animation that cross their face when certain words are said, and you are using that material to reflect them back to themselves in a slightly elevated form. You are showing them a version of themselves that is more interesting, more complex, more worthy of fascination than the version they walk around with daily. This is intoxicating in a way that compliments about appearance or intelligence never quite achieve, because it operates at a deeper level. You are not telling them they are beautiful. You are demonstrating that you see them, and being truly seen is among the most powerful experiences available to a human being. But the seducer never lets this visibility become ordinary. Here is where the principle of strategic withdrawal enters, and it is perhaps the most counterintuitive tool in the entire practice. Just as the other person begins to warm, just as the conversation reaches its most alive and luminous point, you pull back. Not coldly. Not obviously. But you introduce a small, graceful distance. You become slightly less available. You let a message sit a few hours longer than expected. You end the evening at the precise moment when they were hoping it would continue. Green draws on the psychology of intermittent reinforcement here, the same mechanism that makes certain experiences so difficult to walk away from, the unpredictable rhythm of warmth and withdrawal that keeps the nervous system in a state of engaged uncertainty. The mind, when it cannot predict, becomes obsessed. It fills the silence with thought. It rehearses the last interaction, searches it for meaning, constructs elaborate theories about what you were feeling. You have, without saying a word, moved into their interior life and taken up residence there. This must be handled with care, because the line between strategic withdrawal and simple cruelty is real, and crossing it collapses everything. The withdrawal only works when it is preceded by genuine warmth, when the person has been made to feel truly seen and valued and then, briefly, left to wonder. It is the difference between a musician who rests between notes and one who simply stops playing. The rest has meaning only because the music was real. If the warmth was performed or hollow, the withdrawal reads as rejection, and the spell breaks. This is why the inner work of part 1 is not optional. The external mechanics of seduction are only as powerful as the authentic presence behind them. Alongside withdrawal, the skilled seducer learns to work with desire's peculiar relationship to obstacles. Ovid understood that love inflamed by difficulty burns hotter than love handed freely. What is too easily obtained loses its perceived value almost immediately. This is not cynicism but neuroscience, the brain's dopamine system designed to respond to pursuit and novelty rather than possession. Green advises the creation of what he calls the obstacle, not manufactured drama, not games played for their own sake, but a genuine sense that you are someone with standards, a full life, a self that cannot simply be claimed. You are available but not waiting. Interested but not anxious. This posture, when it is real rather than performed, creates a subtle pressure that moves the other person toward you rather than away, the same counterintuitive physics that makes a receding tide irresistible to follow. Mirroring operates on an entirely different but equally powerful register. Where withdrawal works on the imagination, mirroring works on the body and the unconscious. Research in behavioral psychology has confirmed what seducers have known intuitively for centuries, that we are drawn to those who reflect us. Not flattering imitation, which is transparent and embarrassing, but the deep, subtle synchronization of rhythm, energy, vocabulary, and posture that signals to another person's nervous system, "You are safe here, you are understood, I am like you." Green frames this as the art of entering the other person's world completely, temporarily setting aside your own preferences and frameworks to move inside their reality, to speak their emotional language, to want what they want alongside them before gently, gradually, introducing them to wanting something new. It is an act of profound empathy deployed with intention, and it creates a bond that the other person often cannot explain or trace. They simply know that being with you feels different from being with anyone else. The pacing of all of this matters enormously. Seduction that moves too fast triggers alarm. The nervous system reads speed as desperation, and desperation, as we have already established, is lethal. Green speaks of the slow build, the deliberate extension of the approach phase, as one of the most underestimated elements of the entire practice. Each encounter should leave the other person with slightly more than they had before, more warmth, more intrigue, more of the sense that something significant is approaching, but never the full satisfaction of arrival. You are constructing an experience of pleasurable anticipation, a forward lean so sustained and carefully managed that when the culmination finally comes, it feels not like an ending but like the natural completion of something inevitable. They will tell themselves later that it simply happened, that it was organic, unplanned, beyond anyone's control. This is the highest compliment the craft can receive. What you are doing, at every stage of this process, is not manipulating someone against their nature. You are doing something stranger and more interesting than that. You are creating the conditions under which another person can want what they already, at some level, want. You are removing the friction, the social anxiety, the self-doubt, the fear of being too much or not enough, and replacing it with a current of safety and excitement strong enough to carry them past their own hesitations. The destination was always theirs. You simply made the path feel possible, and then inevitable, and then irresistible. And yet for all its power, this is still only the mechanics, the how of seduction divorced from its deepest why. Because the most extraordinary seducers in history were not masters of technique. They were masters of transformation, and the difference between those two things is everything. There is a story Green tells about Cleopatra, not the Cleopatra of monuments and myth, but the one who understood something about human desire that most people never grasp in a lifetime. She did not seduce Julius Caesar and Mark Antony with beauty alone. Egypt was full of beautiful women. She seduced them with the experience of being in her presence, the sensation, specific and unrepeatable, that the world became more vivid, more significant, more charged with possibility when she was in it. Her targets did not leave her company feeling conquered. They left feeling enlarged. And that distinction, subtle as it sounds, contains the entire secret of seduction at its highest level. Everything we have covered until now, the inner architecture, the strategic withdrawal, the mirroring and pacing and careful construction of desire, all of it is in service of this final and most essential truth: the greatest seducers do not make people want them. They make people want to be around who they become when they are with them. This is the alchemical heart of the practice, the place where technique dissolves into something that can only be called a gift. When you have done this for someone, when you have held the mirror at precisely the right angle and in precisely the right light, they do not experience it as seduction. They experience it as awakening. Green draws on the figure of the ideal lover to illustrate this, and it is worth sitting with. The ideal lover, he writes, is someone who seems to offer the fulfillment of a dream, not just romantic fantasy, but the deeper dream each person carries of their own best self, their unlived possibilities, the life that feels perpetually just out of reach. Most people spend their days in the company of others who reflect their limitations back at them, who see them as fixed, known, already fully understood. The seducer sees them differently. The seducer looks at another person the way a sculptor looks at unfinished marble, not with judgment at what is incomplete, but with genuine excitement at what is possible. And people will follow, almost without limit, the person who makes them feel genuinely possible. This is where the ethics of seduction reveal themselves, because there is a version of everything described in this essay that is predatory, and there is a version that is among the most generous things one person can do for another. The difference lies entirely in intention. If you are using these principles to hollow someone out, to take their attention and energy and feeling and give nothing real in return, then you are practicing a kind of theft, and Green himself is clear-eyed about the darkness that runs through the history of seduction. But if you are using them in the service of genuine connection, to cut through the noise and fear and social performance that keep most people from ever truly meeting each other, then seduction becomes something closer to art in its most serious sense, the deliberate creation of an experience that changes the person who encounters it. The ancient Romans understood pleasure and desire as forces that, properly channeled, elevated the human being rather than degrading them. Ovid's Ars Amatoria was scandalous not because it was lewd but because it insisted that love was a skill, that the heart was not simply a passive receiver of feeling but an active, intelligent instrument that could be tuned and played. The Romantics later rebelled against this, insisting that anything deliberate must be inauthentic, that real feeling arrives only by accident and any hand in its creation is a kind of forgery. But this was always a false argument. The chef who masters heat and timing does not produce less nourishing food than the one who cooks carelessly. The architect who understands structure and light does not build a less beautiful home than the one who builds by instinct alone. Mastery and authenticity are not enemies. At their highest expression, they are the same thing. And so the person who has truly learned the art of seduction, who has done the patient work of self-knowledge, who has learned to give attention without need and mystery without coldness, who has mastered the rhythm of approach and withdrawal and the deep practice of making another person feel genuinely seen, this person does not move through the world as a manipulator. They move through it as someone unusually alive, unusually present, unusually capable of contact. They leave people better than they found them. Not because they plan to, necessarily, but because the very skills that make someone seductive, the attention, the empathy, the refusal to be ordinary, the insistence on depth over surface, are also the skills that make someone profoundly human. There is one final thing to understand, and it is perhaps the most liberating. Seduction, at its deepest level, is not something you do to another person. It is something that happens in the space between two people when one of them is fully, courageously, unapologetically present. The techniques are the scaffolding, necessary during construction, but invisible in the finished thing. What remains when the scaffolding comes down is simply a person who has learned to inhabit themselves so completely, to offer their attention so fully, and to see others so clearly that being in their presence becomes an experience people return to again and again without ever quite being able to say why. They will say there is something about you. They will not be wrong. But what that something is, you will know. It is not a trick, not a tactic, not a mask worn to impress. It is the rarest thing in the world, a human being who has done the work of becoming, fully and without apology, themselves. And it turns out that there is nothing more irresistible than that.